Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, first of all, let me just say that I want to thank all of you for what you do. You're charged with managing the most important aspect of our military, and that's the people and the programs that support them. Know much of what you do deals with numbers, but I also know you have an appreciation for what those numbers represent in terms of the individual and his or her family and what it means to our nation. You all, along with our second panel, will help give us a sense of how we're doing and how we can best continue to support the men and women of the armed forces and their families. So I thank you for being here. And Secretary Ginsburg, it's always great to see a Georgian on a panel like this. So thanks for your service. Secretary Stanley, let me just ask you if you're familiar with the situation of the commissary at Dobbins and the one that we're transferring from Gillum to Dobbins. Does that ring a bell at all with you?
Vaguely. If you keep talking, Senator, I think I might pull something out of here.
I'm not surprised that you don't, but okay. Basically it's a BRAC decision was made to close Fort Gillum in Atlanta, and that's the commissary that has served our retired population for decades. And a decision was made by your predecessor to construct a new commissary at Dobbins that obviously will continue to operate, and it's going to serve our retired population, and it's in the hands of DECA right now. That's why I'm not surprised you're not familiar with it, but I wish you would familiarize yourself with it. At some point you're going to have some significant input into it, and it may just be an issue of DECA trying to find the funding for it. But in any event, it is obviously a critical issue for the retired population as well as for our active duty folks in the area.
Yes, sir.
Secretary Lamont, in light of the Fort Hood incident last November, can you elaborate on specific steps that the Army is taking to better recognize the presence of soldiers who may have become radicalized as Hassan was?
I can tell you this: we are going through a very extensive internal review to look at all components of extremism that may have crept into society, and of course may touch more and more into our military services, and what we can do to address those. We're aware of some apparent shortcomings in our officer evaluation forms and in our enlistment evaluations, and how some of the questions, some of the right questions may just not get asked, and some of the identifying risk factors may not just be exposed as well. As you know, there is a defense-wide Fort Hood review in progress right now. And as I understand it, and perhaps Dr. Stanley knows more than I, that perhaps sometimes this summer there'll be a full report, as all the services, I believe, are involved in that report. But certainly the Army is drilling down very deeply to see what in the world did we miss here.
Well, let me just mention to all of you, I think Senator Graham may have mentioned this in his opening comments about the Reserve and the Guard and Reserve Retirement Initiative, early retirement initiative that we have been successful in having put in place, that we're now looking to extend the retirement date back to service beginning on September 11. And if there are any stumbling blocks out there, I would appreciate hearing from you now if you're aware of anything. Obviously, funding is an issue. We're going to continue to work that until we ultimately have that retirement date or that service date to qualify for retirement go back to September 11, when so many of our men and women began being called up. Any comments any of you have relative to any issues that are outstanding that might be in our way on that issue?
Senator, I haven't heard anything, Senator, and I'm not sure if my colleagues have.
No, I've heard very little. But as you say, the number one thing that we always look at on something like that, of course, is the resource concerns, yep, as you are well aware.
Yeah. Well, we'll continue to work that from our end. One other question, Secretary Lamont. I understand that the Vice Chief of the Army is currently hosting an online virtual conference regarding the future of the U.S. Army Officer Corps. The central premise behind this virtual conference is the recruitment and employment of talent within the Army. This sounds like a great idea and a great way to look at the caliber of the young men and women who make up our officer corps, from flag officers on down. Or could you give us any comment on that, and are any of the other services doing something similar to this or have plans for it?
Well, I understand the goal of what the vice is after here. As our officer structure is not where we need it to be, given some of the demands that we've had over the past 8 or 9 years, and as we've moved to our modular rotational model in ARFRGen, it has caused some fairly serious changes in how our officer structure is handled. And I think there's an effort out there, particularly in the grades of major, for instance, there are serious shortcomings there in the numbers that we have available. And I think through what he is trying to do is look for any acceptable options and alternatives, how we identify our officer corps and where we can move them within the structure that's available now. Our other grade challenges, grade plate challenges that we have.
I'm not familiar with the program, but we work very closely with the Army. I'd love to reach out with my colleague here, learn more about it. Certainly provide some formal views to you.
Okay. Secretary Garcia, Secretary Stanley, anything going on in your branch similar to this?
I'm not familiar with the program. I'm, in fact, learning about it as he's talking, Senator.
Yeah, well, it does sound like a good idea, because everybody's got the same issues relative to the makeup of our officer corps. The Army and the Marine Corps, I guess, have a little bit different situation, just because you've been taxed more than anybody else. But it is an issue that sounds to me like it has a lot of merit to it, and I would encourage every branch to follow suit there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Chambliss. I'm going to ask